thank you very much for joining us for this today. Great segue from John this morning, obviously, in the conversation. We're going to continue it. Today is all about how to operationalize your culture. And if you've done that successfully, great. Well, then we will call on you in your tables to share what you're doing. If you haven't, maybe you'll learn some new nuggets. So there's going to be 3 of us presenting today because no one needs to hear Matt talk more. And it's going to be very interactive. So to get started, we're going to do a little bit of an exercise, and you're going to do it in a group, with your group at the table. We're going to talk about a couple things here. So actually, before we get to that, when we talk about culture, because everyone says culture, right? Who hasn't heard culture? Hey, we got to do culture. Yesterday we talked about culture, trumping strategy. We've heard a lot about, hey, park the X's and O's. Let's get the soft skills going. Let's do all that. That's how you really weave it in. So let's start there. When you talk about culture, you break it down into purpose, vision, mission, and then your KPIs. It's a really systematic and formulaic way of actually bringing it to life. And we're going to cover that today, how to go through it from a tactical perspective, from a communications perspective, and overall. Culture is the most important thing, and clearly, we've really not been able to get culture, improve culture, how do I say it nicely? Improve the culture of our sport, soccer, in our country. Okay? So the first thing we want to think about is what happens when we don't live our organizational culture. Really simple question it seems, but we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to get into what happens when we don't align with the provincial organizational culture, and obviously we're going to get to what happens when we don't align with the national organizational culture. Because I think we can all agree it doesn't make sense for us to have our own strong local club organizational culture that does not align with the provincial or national culture. What happens when that doesn't happen? And for most people in here, who in here is involved with club licensing? Put up your hand, nice and high, please. If your club is club licensed, okay, perfect. So that's what we're going to talk about. How do we actually bring that to life rather than just take the box and submit it to say, okay, we've done it, and now our players can be seen. So in your groups, you're going to discuss what happens when you don't live your organizational culture and it's not aligned with the provincial and national culture. We've got 2 minutes, have a robust conversation. Go. Everybody, we're going to go around and ask 5 tables what your discussion was. We'll start at that table back there. Gabe, your table.
Very important.
Okay.
We're talking about trust in the system, again, from all levels, making sure that the province is set the role, making sure that the provincial body is set the role for district, and then after that.
And what happens when there's a big breakdown of trust?
Misalignment, responsibilities are all that, and everybody fighting fingers at each other.
Yeah, not my job, not my fault. Good, thanks. That table back there, what are some of the things that you uncovered?
We talked a little bit about resistance to change, but if you follow the process, you become better for it.
Absolutely, makes sense. Good. Raheem, your table?
Thanks. We actually may have gone a little bit off topic in our conversation compared to the exact wording there. But I think what we talked about is if people don't know who they serve, then how do you even know what your culture can be? So if you say you're a community organization, do you actually serve your community and all of it? Or do you just serve the people you want to serve in your community? And so you can't have you have a misaligned culture if you're not serving who you're actually supposed to serve.
Absolutely, good point. Over here. Who wants to be the spokesperson?
Defining our culture, our organizational culture before almost having this conversation about how it's within our organization. And we do what parts we actually already work versus where we are taking. We have to be efficient, so we need to mandate to do it. So what works, what doesn't work, and what is established as our club culture.
Thank you, that's honest. Now?
Losing interest of your stakeholders. So they buy into your culture when they come on board. If you're not continuing to live that, then they're why am I here? So what do I stand for? What are we trying to achieve?
That's a great point. There's nothing more effective and less sexy than the word consistency. Let me say that again. Nothing more effective but less sexy than the word consistency. Because that's where we fall down. And in any organization that has a great culture, that is the toughest thing, is to maintain that level of culture. Right? As everyone probably experienced it. You start off at the beginning of the year, you write your strategic plan, and all of a sudden, oh shit, registration, we gotta do this, and then you're on the hamster wheel, and then there's complaints, and then you're already off your culture, and you're into doing shit the day before. Okay, good. So thanks. Well, hopefully that gives some input and light to what we're gonna be dealing with. So let's get into the next one. When we talk about this misalignment, you know, why do we need this? Why do we need culture? Why do we need to follow the licensing? It's all there, but there's desperate words, and what we want to do by the end of this session is create some alignment and help you create some alignment and give you some tools, tips, and strategies to create that alignment, and a lot's going to come from you. Remember, like we said yesterday, we don't know it all, we don't profess to know it all, and collectively, together, we're going to be better. So, first of all, what is culture? What is culture? And anyone can just put up your hand. There's no wrong answers. This is a safe room. What is culture? I'll let it go from 1,000, 2, 1,000. Yeah, perfect.
What's left over when you take away all the people, titles, and positions?
Really good. Does anyone have anything that could be better than that? Because if we don't, we'll just use that. So, and even simpler, it's a way of doing things. Culture is a way of doing things. And it's the right way or the wrong way. It's the way you establish, but it's the way your organization does things. And like we talked about yesterday, it's really quick and easy to take shortcuts and, you know, put self-interest first. We heard that today. You can't argue with Herman. You can't argue with him. Like when he shows the stats and what he's accomplished and the process that he uses, and you now heard it over and over and over, and some of you are already doing a good job living it. It's indisputable that this needs to come first, but it's the hardest thing to do because, again, it requires consistency, it requires buy-in, it requires you leading other people other than yourself. So why do we need culture? We talked about this yesterday. Pretty self-explanatory. We know when we don't have a good culture, what can happen. It's not worth it. And this is a great time in sport to be leaders. For soccer to lead, arguably Canada's largest sport, participation sport. Why don't we lead? Why don't we do better? Why don't we push for better? And we can start at our local clubs and filter up, or we can start from the top and filter down. Okay, so we understand why culture matters. Who's responsible for leading culture? Who's responsible for upholding culture, and why?
Everyone.
Everyone. Who's everyone?
Players, coaches, referees, everybody's part of the club.
And what happens when someone refuses to lead or is not interested in being a part of that? What do you do? We say that easily, and you're right. How do we address it?
Education?
We have a strike one, strike two, strike three rule. There's no right answer for this. I'm asking everyone here, what do you do when someone's not upholding your culture? What do you do?
Just more demonstration.
Talk, yep. Feedback. Okay, bring them in, sit them down, reinforce. We talked about sales yesterday, and if you're going to sell anything successfully, 6 to 20 points of contact. Has anyone ever heard that? A sale is made anywhere from 6 to... Nobody walked into iPhone in the day or Apple and said, I want to pay $1,100 for this gadget that's going to kill our entire site, and thought it was a great idea. We heard it. Hey, Mom, you get your pictures all on this phone. Hey, look, the music's there too. We saw Steve Jobs' movie. We saw an advertisement on Super Bowl. We saw, as we're driving by the bus stops, the Apple. Like, it's 6 to 20 points of contact to make the sale. So what we're doing is we need to make sure our culture shows up, not just verbally, but how does it show up when people pull into our clubs, when they walk into the door, when they hear messaging? Are we all using the same message? It's called key messaging. We're going to get into it later. But is everyone speaking the same language? And the buy-in. So that starts with us at the top. How many people are in here are executive directors at their clubs? How many people, put your hands up nice and high and keep them up. How many people are board members? How many people are technical directors? How many people are coaches? Perfect. So we've got everybody in here that's at the top level of your organizations. We're responsible for upholding that because we have to set that example first so that it filters down and filters up through the parents and kids. So nothing I'm saying is nothing that people don't know yet, and we're going to get into the better part of it when I turn it over to the ladies. But this is important to really level set what we're doing. So where does it need to present itself? It needs to present itself everywhere. We just talked about that on the pitch, through the different seasons, etc. When do we review and revise our culture? When should we do that? No. Yeah, you said it. Ongoing. So it's always a process. It's not something that we just set down at the beginning of the year and then send out the questionnaire at the end of the year that says, hey, as a club, did we do what we said we were going to do? And it has nothing to do with the values that we discussed yesterday of the kids, the players, the parents, and the coaches. So we need to constantly be revisiting, revising, and reviewing our culture. Okay, any questions so far? Pretty self-explanatory? Hot in here, huh? Nope, just me. Sweaty. How do we maximize our cultural return on investment?
Have a plan.
Yep. Work hard, have a plan. Yeah, I'm going to go back to you because you had a really good answer.
Metrics, it needs to be able to be measured.
What's that?
It needs to be able to be measured and stuff.
Who is this? Who are you?
It's ball.
Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dave, not Paul. Raheem, Paul. Great answer, Paul. Anyone else? How do we measure our cultural return on investment?
Have an action plan.
Action plan? Retention. Who said that? Retention. That is the ultimate, because we're in the business of attract, retain, and grow our sport. Attract, retain, and grow our sport. What are we good at? We're good at attracting. Come on, kids, sign up, sign up, sign up. Hey, we gotta get new players, we gotta get new players. We often neglect the players that we have and bringing them into that culture so that they turn into players at whatever level they want, whatever pathway they want to pursue. And if it's not players, then they can go into officiating, then they can go into coaching. How do we level up? How do we make sure that they want to stay in our club? How do we make sure that they want to come back after they play and contribute to their club? How many of you are, put your hand up nice and high, are working at a club that you played at? Put your hands up nice and high. Okay, so not that many. So that's a great opportunity for us, no? Because if we're doing things really, really well, despite moving away and doing different things, if we can get more people coming back to our clubs and participating, then that's a great culture. That's a sign of a great culture, like the All Blacks. The All Blacks have a great example. Okay, any questions on anything to do with what we've covered? Yeah?
Talk about retention, but isn't also measuring it based on how many you take on?
Absolutely. Successorship, yeah. So that would be growth. So attract, retain, and grow. So I would include that in the growth metrics. How many people here have retention metrics? Or do that as part of your, yeah, perfect. Okay, how many people are in here are going to look at that after today? Okay, good. So that's an opportunity.
You want to compensate your top level staff to have that as a metric for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and
Drive
again,
that focus.
it goes back to the conversation that we had earlier today, which was it's not about you, it's about the players, it's about the coaches, it's about their development journey. Okay, perfect. Now, that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to turn it over to Taryn, and Taryn is going to walk you through the next stages.
Perfect, thanks, Matt. Great, so we've done a lot of work talking about culture. Need your coaching voice today. I'm like, I feel like I'm 6 feet tall, but I realize I am 5'2". So we've done a lot of work talking about culture, and what we're going to talk about now is culture's at the middle. It's what you're living and breathing and bringing to the club. But how do you actually create a culture in your organization? So we're going to go through developing a strategic plan, the operational and technical side of that strategic plan, the communication, so how are we actually communicating what we're trying to achieve, project management, so how are we actually getting things done, and then the last part, which Matt talked about, is how are we actually evaluating and reviewing what we're doing and measuring it. Culture is always going to be in the middle of this, so we're going to go through each of these pieces and talk about how do you build all of these plans and create a very unique culture in your organization to attract, retain, and grow your membership. So we always start at the beginning with your strategic plan. The first thing you do in a strategic plan is an environmental scan. So how can you build a strategic plan if you don't know what's actually going on? The strategic plan the environmental scan has two parts to it. One reason you do it is you open the dialogue with every single stakeholder in your group and give them the opportunity to hear from them and say, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Where are the opportunities? And the second part is you're actually opening the dialogue back and saying, we've heard from you, we value you, we want you to stay as part of this organization if you're the right fit. And then you're going to communicate back to them, now we've heard from all of you, what are we going to do about this? What are our goals for the year? Where is that alignment as an organization of what we're trying to achieve? Without that communication, they sit there and go, well, why should I give you feedback? You're not listening to me, you're not doing anything with it. So the critical piece is you actually have to communicate back to them and tell them what you're going to do. And we know parents are going to have opinions. We know every coach's opinion. We talked about yesterday, Matt brought up the slide with the elephant and said, everyone has a personal agenda. And what a strategic plan does is brings alignment and says, this is our agenda as a club, and you're all a piece of it, and we need you to help achieve this. So the environmental scan is really important because it's the beginning of the conversation and the development of that strategic plan. We then move on to, okay, well, what are we going to do? What do we stand for as an organization? And what are we trying to achieve? And how are we going to do that? So I'm going to go through the top part of the strategic plan, and then I'll hand it over to Elizabeth to go through more of the bottom.
I just want to jump in. So how many people in the room send out questionnaires before they do the strategic plan? Just put up your hand if you do that. And do you send those questionnaires out to the different stakeholder groups, players, parents, coaches, and administration? And is that questionnaire the same question to all of those groups, or is it individualized based on what we talked about yesterday? Because what Taryn and Elizabeth I see often is clubs, not just in soccer, but in a lot of clubs, is they sit down to do their strategic planning without going and getting that information from your stakeholders. And you just heard John Herdman talk about trust. So how can we build that trust better, build that trust, if we're just asking A, generic questions, or B, if we're not asking them anything at all? It's something to think about. And that's why we always start when Taryn especially goes and works with organizations. That's always, we actually ask 1 to 10. Fun, friends, fair play, friendly competition, finishing the season better than we started. Players, tell us how we're doing. 1 to 10. And then we put that in a net promoter score. And why do we do that? Because numbers don't lie. And then we ask the parents, safety, competition, development, fair play. How are we doing 1 to 10? And then we get that number. Because getting that number allows us to then actually revisit our strategic plan at the end of the year and report it back and say, here's where we started, and here's where we are mid-season and end of season. Make sense? Can we think about doing that if we're not doing that already? Can we think about being really specific with the questions that we're asking based on what we already know the stakeholders value? Because to Taryn's point, if we don't do that, we're decreasing the opportunity for buy-in. Sorry to interrupt.
No, great point. And the piece that Matt's also talking about is, this is going to be the beginning of the strategic plan, the environmental scan. You should be asking surveys at the beginning of the season, the end of the season, to understand how did we do. It's the same as you're going to test and baseline all of the athletes at the beginning and the end and say, this is your developmental growth. As an organization, you need to do the same to yourself. So you get all this incredible information and data and feedback from all of your stakeholders of what's important to them and where are the gaps. And then you come together and build a strategic plan. And we always start with what is your purpose as an organization? And then we dive into, so this is really why do you exist? It's you know, when you ask questions and you're getting into it, you keep asking why, until you can't ask why anymore because you have your answer. Your vision is, where do we want to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? This is like big picture. It will not be achieved potentially in your lifetime at the club, but we see that shining light, that North Star that we want to get to. The mission is, how are you going to get there? So it's really the operation side of it. This is how we're literally going to get to our vision. And then the values, this is, and coming back to what Paul had said earlier, this is who you want at the table and the ways that the actions that you're going to operate. So it's really the behaviors that you operate as a club and the standards that you set. So, and we'll go through an example of all of these. So I'm actually going to call on a club in this room and talk about what is your purpose. And before I do, because Paul knows I'm following me, does anyone want to, I'm going to ask everyone, why do we do what we do? We're all in soccer. Why do we do what we do? You just shout it out, otherwise I'll pick on people.
Love it.
I'll pick on him, even Jackson.
For the love of the game.
Love the game, I love that.
For the kids.
For the kids, yeah.
For change.
For change? Building community, yeah. Raheem?
I'll just put the hood up.
No, I'm just kidding. I just like to pick on him when he isn't in. Anyone else?
Healthier society.
Healthier society, I love that. Yeah,
To continue to move forward.
continuing to move forward. Amazing. All of these are why we do what we do. We are building communities through sport. We are building the leaders of, we are building exceptional leaders. It goes beyond we're trying to just get champions and we're trying to win the game. It goes beyond this. It is really about the development, when we talked about development a lot yesterday. It's about the development of individuals, it's about the development of a club. So that's really where we started, is the purpose. And that's the guiding light of, you might be really frustrated in your day-to-day, and it's a reminder of, why am I doing what I'm doing? It's not to help always 6-year-olds win the game, it's about helping them be part of the community. So we always start with the why. So I'm gonna ask Paul over here, not that Paul, this Paul, but we need like nicknames for Pauls. Waterloo United just went through the So can you tell us what is the strat plan, purpose, vision, mission, values? Yes.
It was a long process, I can tell you that, in terms of trying to figure out what that was. And we had a lot of different opinions on it. But really the purpose of our organization is to provide a safe soccer experience.
And I don't know if you can hear all the way back there, but to provide a safe soccer experience.
And that was really what it was. No matter what programming you have, and we talk about community, and it really was, it came down to that, was can you provide a community organization that provides a soccer program that is safe, enjoyable, and inclusive.
So they've got their strat plans on their website, you can check it out. But really, the beginning, this top part of the strat plan is, this is who we are as an organization, high level, what we're trying to achieve. Then we look at it, take a step back and say, okay, we've got this big idea, we know who we are, we know who we want at the table, now what? We don't need a 10-page PDF of figuring out and explaining that in a 10-year plan. We then dive into an operational plan that says, to achieve that, what do we need to do in year one? If this is now year one. Then, and we look at, I mean, Elizabeth's going to go even deeper into this, but what are the objectives that we're trying to achieve? What are the strategies of how we're going to achieve that? What are our timelines? And how are we measuring that? And who is responsible? So you really take this big picture idea and say, okay, this is how we're actually going to achieve it. And you take that feedback from all of your stakeholders and all of their opinions, and you go back and say, okay, we've got 20 things that we really want to achieve, but we're going to pick these 4 this year and do them really well. Because what we don't want to do is say, we're going to promise the world we're going to do 20 things, and you do 5 of them half-ass. So really it's about coming down and saying, what is realistic, and who are we making sure is accountable to do this, and how are we supporting them in the journey? So that's really the strategic plan. And the reason the values come into play is, that's your culture piece of how are we actually operating to achieve our strategic plan and build this really unique culture, and we make sure we've got the right people at the table. So I don't know if anyone knows our values at FSQ, but one of them is, we've got 5, there's always a huge 5 values. One of them is GSD, we get shit done, whatever it takes. Another one is excellence. Excellence is a habit. Adaptability. There isn't one size that fits all. You know, clubs are different, organizations are different. Legacy, because business is a force for good. And teamwork. We is greater than me. So in every single thing that we do when we operate, we always come back to that and say, are we operating with excellence? Are we getting shit done? Are we working as a team? And are we adapting to the climate that we're in and the clients that we're working with? And are we leaving a legacy? Are we actually coming in and making an impact? So high level, this is your strategic plan. And then you go through and operationalize it into an operations plan. And then how do you communicate it? And then how do you actually evaluate this and make sure that it's working and checking in on it? Any questions on the strategic plan before we dive into the operations side?
Does it matter when in the season you're going to start it?
When do you start it? Great question. So what's always interesting is today is the best day. It's one of those things of, as an organization, you need to figure out, well, when can we actually run the surveys and do the environmental scans so we can get the most engagement and the most feedback? When can you actually bring people together? Sometimes at the beginning of the season, registration's going and it's chaotic, so you can actually get people's attention. So as a club, you need to figure out when in the season makes sense. Is there, you know, some clubs do it in the summer when they're a little bit quieter because the outdoor programs are running and they can get the staff. But it is really important to pick a time and do it and commit to it, and also pick a time to check in. So every month at your board meeting, you should be reporting back and looking at it and saying, how are we tracking? And every year you do the same thing where you actually redo your strategic plan and reevaluate and say, is this all true? What do we need to evolve and change? So it really is, there's no time like the present, but as a club you have to look and say, when in our season makes the most sense.
How many clubs in here are engaged in strategic planning on an annual basis? Can you put up your hand? On an annual basis? And when do you do it? Whoever put up their hand, when do you do that? Just shout it out. Is it 2 months before the season starts? Is it 3 months before the season starts? 6 months? Spring? How long does it usually take you? Whoever put up their hand. Yeah, honestly, 2 hours? Oh, too long, yeah. How long does it take you? Whoever put up your hand, how long does it take you to complete the strategic planning process?
We have a discussion once a year.
Months.
In the fall, after our summer season is over, we have typically do a Saturday where we discuss a whole bunch of stuff at the club, and we go through the strategic plan and see if it aligns.
Right.
So we kind of renew it, I guess. It's not like from beginning to end.
Right.
A Saturday, 2 hours.
Saturday, 2 hours, more than good time.
Right. Yep.
We have a debrief at the end of the high season this summer, but we do strategic planning every month.
Every month, just to update.
Like revisit an item every month.
Right on. Good. So, why doesn't strategic planning get done well? Because it takes too long and it involves a lot of different people and opinions. So, if you're doing strategic planning, you've got to be really intentional and you've got to lay the framework and say, hey, listen, we're coming together for 6 hours. We've got all the information from our stakeholders. We've got all the information from last year. Here's what we're expected to do from club licensing. Here it is. We're compiling all that information, and you send it out in advance, and you outcome goals. So this is the meeting. This is what we want. This is how it's going to happen. Otherwise, strategic planning goes on and on and on forever, and then you're just in a process of we just got to get this done because registration starts and the season's starting. Right? Am I right or wrong on that? And then it doesn't get done, and then it's an exercise in futility. And why even bother except to get the club licensing renewal? That's what we want to change because we're not. That's not creating alignment. It's not creating trust. It's not creating buy-in. It's not creating value for anybody. So we encourage you to really simplify this process. 1 second. We encourage you to really simplify this process. And if you need help, call us. That's what we do is help you. Call somebody. If you don't want to call us, call anybody that has done this that can help guide you through it. Like Paul said, it was a long process for them. And actually, they had to go at it twice over the span of what? A year and a half with different people, different boards, etc. But now what we're seeing is this, and now it's coming into this. Yes?
So we have a small club where I'm at, and the problem I'm finding is getting any feedback. Like I send out the information, I talk about it. We haven't done any sort of formal strategic planning as of yet, but I can't get feedback. I can't get that information. how do you get people to buy into it? Or actually even look at the email
Yeah,
and
good
not
question.
send it to, delete it.
Yeah, good question. So, once you start delivering on that on a consistent basis, which isn't sexy, but it's effective, you'll start getting the results that you want. So, for example, if you don't have player feedback, you tell your coaches at the beginning of the first session, here's a piece of behavior, and you ask the questions, and the players submit it back to them, and they submit it to you. And the same with parents. Like, you've got to do that, because if you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for a world of hurt. That's just one person's experience. Anyone else have any insights how to answer that question about not getting feedback? Because it happens to all of us. Yep.
You need to have a deadline. If you put a deadline on a date, the urgency is there. If you just leave it open-ended, then people I'll get around to it.
When they get around to it. Yep.
I think just, you don't get feedback, the world's run by those that show up, so you step it out there. But just be prepared to accept criticism and critique, and then you invite them in, right? And you'll gain, you'll build, you'll snowball the world.
Offer some swag. Anybody to respond in the list before your name.
Yeah, all good ideas. Keep going.
I think you have to just go straight, you have to go to the grass. You have to actually go face to face, and actually have to stand there and invite that, and then,
I'm on the field, it's a small club, I'm on the
Yeah.
pitch when I'm not playing.
yeah, good.
Also take into consideration, there's so many opportunities that people are constantly being asked for a survey. So
And
if you
that's
don't
what I
connect to like why this is so critical and why it's important for them to have a say, most people want to help generally or want to provide some type of element and so, or some type of feedback. And when we broke down for ours recently, when we tried to explain like, this is why we need this, as a provincial sport organization, we actually went to our member organizations and said, if we need all of you to share this, we need a say from all of you as well. And so it wasn't just us asking, but if the teams are asking parents to, or the managers of the teams are saying, hey, please help us here, there's probably going to be a lot more engagement and uptake, because if they don't hear from you as a club on a consistent basis and you ask them for something, they're not necessarily going to come to the table and be like, sure, but if the manager or the coach is asking, there's probably going to be a much higher uptake immediately.
Yeah. Yep.
I think it's building that engagement. I think one of the most efficient way to do it is to have a fun activity, fun social activities, just to build that engagement and trust element and connections, and then that process of sending surveys will be easier because you build that connection. And I think the fun
and festivals and stuff.
yeah, fun elements, barbecues, for example. I mean, in this symposium here or the summit is the fun element, the connection, the social connection is very important, and it creates a fun environment.
We had that the first time nobody answered. The second time, like Willie was saying, we went to the field, and then when they actually saw we're implementing, when the third time they're like, oh, they actually listened. Now they're willing to answer.
Yeah, hey, that's the point right there. And I'm not crapping on anybody, but typically we get feedback and we don't do anything with it. So if we do that 1, 2, or 3 times, then what's the point of giving feedback? Once you've demonstrated that, hey, we've listened, thank you, and that's in the communication, that's in the cadence, that's in your comms, which we're going to talk about, how you then continue to build that culture. So all great points.
Yeah, there's a lot of great discussion that can keep going, but we want to be mindful of time. And I think what we do want to say though is we encourage all of you to share this experience with each other and provide that advice, because what might work for one club here won't work for another club. So again, just a few of those things we talked about is reminding them the value of why you're doing surveys and what you're going to do with it, giving them a deadline, making sure to make it anonymous. For a lot of people too, they're like, ooh, if I have to put my name, I don't want to be my full self and give you everything. But then also talk to the coaches, talk to the administrators. You know how many coaches you have, you know how many survey responses you should get. So you can literally email the coaches and say, we got 17 out of 23 surveys back. The 6 of you who haven't done it, and I don't want to shame it that way, but you won't know the names. Just say you need the last 6 to submit it. So there is ways that you can encourage them, and then again, it's once they see the value, they'll keep continuing and look forward to it. And consistency, like we keep saying, preseason, end of season. Parents know it's coming before, they know it's coming after, the players, the coaches, administrators, everyone. So we're gonna dive right into the operations of it now, then the marketing, the communication side, the project management, and the evaluations. Hello, everyone. So for those who don't know me personally, and I think I do know a lot of you in the room, my name is Elizabeth McCaw, but I was actually an executive director for 7 years. So when we talk about strategic planning and our vision, mission, values, what I also want us to look at is it is irrelevant if we're in club licensing. If we're not, even if we're not striving to do the paperwork, check the boxes, all of the things we're talking about is just naturally how we run sport business. So if we want to run a strong sport business, we should just be naturally doing these things as part of our annual cadence. I understand, because I lived in your seat, it is extremely, extremely difficult to put these things at the top of the to-do list, because the fires, the personnel, turnover, new programming, new mandates often take weight away from running our actual sport business. So from here on out, no matter your seat, and whether you're a national youth or community club that is small and just getting started, just start at whatever point you can start at, because I know at my club we were not a national youth license holder. However, I checked every box I could because we wanted to be the best club we could be in Canada. We were never a national youth license holder, and that was fantastic for us. We knew who we wanted to be, and it was irrelevant. So I don't want you to feel just that you're not a license holder, oh, I don't need to do this work because I'm not going there. This is just good sport business. So when we look at operations, we talk about that strategic plan that we put together. We sat in a room, we sent out the surveys, we put a beautiful infographic on our website. But what do we do next? That's our goal. It may be a 3-year, a 5-year, but how do we operationalize that to actually get the work done? So we say, we're going to grow membership by 5%. That's fantastic. Are you going to look in 3 years and go, oh wait, we went down 5%. That's unfortunate. Let's put a new infographic up, and let's wait 2 to 3 years, and we'll look at it again. Well, that's just not good business. So what we want to look at is taking the objectives and your results. Most of you will see that your infographic has one big heading at the top, financial stability. But from financial stability, you're likely going to have subcategories. So it's going to be program enhancement, revenue generation, finding new ways to bring in revenue that are non-membership based. Those are all going to be those sub-key results of your objective. So when we find that objective and we have those subcategories, now what I love comes into play, which not many people love, and if you do come into my circle after this, is operationalizing it so you can measure it. So where we're going to go from here is a framework. And I love that your computers are on your desk. I'm going to talk through this. You can look at it. Every operational plan can be different. I'm sure if you ask Dave for examples at Canada Soccer of all the different versions of operational plans, there is no right way, cookie cutter. You're going to Google it. You're going to get assistance from consultants. You're going to do it yourself. The objective is to have all the categories there, and this is just a simple work through. Some of you are more advanced in this stage. Some of you are just getting started. So you want your main objective, financial stability, all your subcategories. What do you want to see in that category? You want to measure those targets. How will you know if you've succeeded? If you have financial stability and it's program growth, what are those actions in programming that you're going to do to achieve that goal? Accountability. Who in your organization is accountable for that box? So when you say programming growth, who do we look at within the organization to say, Kim, did we get there? If we don't put someone accountable to it, at the end of our 3-year cycle, we're going to go, oh well, because we don't know who is in charge of it. Budget considerations. Our budget consideration is what impact is it going to have on the club budget. So when we actually go through our budget cycle, we can see how that objective is going to align with the financial stability of the club. And timelines, this is the fun part for me, is how you frame it out against your strat plan calendar cycle. If you say your strat plan is 3 years, then you want your timelines to align with your overall strategy. I personally like to have an image like this up as I'm operationalizing my plan. I do so because the infograph says it's a 3-year cycle. If we break it into quarters, then we see, okay, I've got 3 years, 12 quarters to make this happen. Take each line, go through the process. What you can also do here is write when your budget is created. So if that's your Q3, then you know in Q3, any of your budgetary decisions need to align with the yellow. So it's going to help you align those objectives, how you're going to get there into the cycle. When is your high season? If your high season is Q2, don't put your heavy load into Q2 because you're going to misbalance your operational plan. So again, this is high level. You can take a screenshot of this. You can follow along. We're going to do a little bit of a short exercise at the end. So we have something like program enhancements. This is a live look at an operational plan. So you've taken what's pretty on the infograph, you've narrowed it down, you've given it measures, you've told yourself who's accountable for it, and then you're going to add your budget considerations. So do you have the personnel in the budget to accomplish the task? What marketing, program expense, where is that going to come from so when you get there, you know to add it into your budget? Then timelines. So the timelines is a beautiful opportunity. At the end of this process, I'll pause. Does anyone say, I don't have time for any of this? And you likely don't. But if you start small, even that is an indication to simplify your strategic plan. It's great to have a beautiful graphic, but if you can't operationalize it, pick one and take that one and move it through 1 year of a calendar so that you can say, awesome, we accomplished it. Next year, add 2. So when you get to that point that you have your timelines, you're going to move that column into a calendar. And you're going to see against this graph where all of those objectives lie. If year 3, Q1, is heavy, then you can say, oh, drop and drag. You're going to say, there's no way we're going to accomplish that in Q1, so I'm going to move it around. I'm going to play with that timeline to ensure I have balance, consistency, and at the end of the day, I can accomplish these tasks. Where we go from here, we've finished our 3-year cycle. We're going to talk about project management and evaluation. Where we get at the end is how we report it. So I would say our 2.0, maybe 3.0. 1 is our strategic plan, 2 is operationalizing it, and then how are we reporting it back? We did that wonderful survey at the beginning to gain feedback. That created a beautiful infograph on our website. We operationalized it so we can actually see it come to life. And then we're going to report back to our members to say, wow, you helped us build this strategy, and because we know our why, we are going to report back to you in a beautiful new infograph that shows you all the beautiful, wonderful things that you've done as an organization. And then we start the process over again. So you'll just see that it's a churn. As you build towards the start and development of your why, you build a strategy of how you're going to get there in short cycles. I would suggest no more than 3 years because you'll lose the plot. COVID was a perfect example. Have a 5-year strategic plan and have COVID hit in the middle, you're likely going to have to revise. My last comment, your annual report is allowed to revise your strategic plan. COVID is a perfect example of that. If COVID hit in year 2 of your cycle, tell your members. Your annual report can be a beautiful opportunity to say, guys, we had this pandemic, and in that pandemic, we had to make adjustments. Finances had to come first, personnel had to change, programming had to take a back seat. Publish that, show your members what you're doing, and continue on your cycle. Where we go from here, and we're just going to do a maybe minute, because I think we want to catch up a bit. Okay, so on the whiteboards is just to help us stay on track. When we talk about gaps, so a gap analysis is again something you can Google, but it really asks yourself your current state, your future state, which is where you want to be, and then what are the gaps to get there? Every organization from every seat is going to be different. So with your board hat, you can look from that lens. As an organization at the board level, strategic planning is your board and likely your ED. Operational planning is your ED with likely your operations staff. After that, you're going to get into our project management and evaluation at the end. So spend 2 minutes just thinking, talking, writing. What is your current state from culture to strategy to operation plans? Where would you like to see yourself, and what gaps exist for you right now? So where we go from here is the shift. We're going to look at, because you can only bore people so long with operations, which I love. And remember, all those who love it, come and see me. Where we go from here is communication. How do we effectively communicate to our members a multitude of different things? But Taryn's going to walk through the different components of good, strong communication, and then we're going to get back to the wonderful world of project management. So now that you guys have spent a few minutes talking about what were some of the gaps that you had from an operations perspective, what are some of the things that you want to achieve? And we just shout it out or I'll call on people. I'll take my time when I call you, Ruby, don't worry.
I know it's coming.
Anyone want to jump in and talk about one of the great, I'll just pick 5 tables otherwise.
Human resources.
Sorry, say that?
Human resources.
Human resources, yeah, great one. Being able to be consistent, that's great.
And one of the gaps is knowing what you want to do, but you don't have it documented or organized and laid out. So you've got these plans for 3 years from now or whatever, but you don't actually have it identified as a goal and starting the process of how you're going to get there in 3 years.
I love that. So I don't know if you guys can hear, but it's like you've got all these ideas and you haven't actually laid it out in a way that you can see how you're going to operationalize it over 3 years.
The two-way communication.
Two-way communication.
Take it one way, do it, or we're not communicating back on a consistent basis.
Communicating back on a consistent basis. I love that.
Business acumen.
Business acumen.
There's just lots of sports people that keep getting promoted to a point where they actually aren't sure what they're doing.
It's a great, yeah, it's a great point too, because a lot of people start in a sport, and we see this across every sport we work with. They absolutely love playing. They come back and they become a coach, and then they start moving through, but they never step back and say, okay, how can I build my human resources capability, or my project management capability, or my communication capability, and all of those responsibilities added to your plate, but you're not necessarily given the training, and many of you here are interested in professional development, so you go out and you find it. So I love it. There's tons of gaps, and I think the biggest thing is identifying them and saying, how are we now going to address them? So we're going to dive into that, and I love it because it comes up every single time we talk about communication. So you've got this amazing strat plan, you've got this glossy PDF infographic, you've asked for feedback, and then what do you do with it? 9 out of 10 will put it on their website and never do anything with it. And I'm not saying just soccer clubs, and there's a lot that aren't in this room. A lot of you are the exception. But a lot of sports, you have this, and businesses, they have this beautiful strat plan, and it just sits there and falls dust. So communication is a big piece of how are you actually telling people this is what we're doing? And the image that Elizabeth had brought up on the annual plan, which is a great example, we work with them, Whitlam Metro Ford, we do a lot of work with them. and help them actually design their annual plan and then communicate it back out to all of their members. So you guys have been sitting now for just over an hour. I'm going to ask everyone to stand up. Quick little stretch. We're not just doing a stretch class. We're actually stand. So I would like, if you can speak one or more languages, stay standing. Which I would hope all of you are staying standing. One or more. I didn't say you have to speak it well, but you can speak at least one more language. Amazing. So everyone can speak at least one language somewhat well. Okay, if you can speak 2 or more languages, stay standing. And then we're too low. You can go to Mexico and you can order a drink.
This was important.
I would say we've got like 60% of the room, ish, 60 to 70%. You can speak 3 or more languages, stay standing. Cool. We're gonna get to the end. Okay, 4 or more languages. 5 or more languages. That's right. For the people who speak 4 or more languages, stand back up. What languages do you speak?
English, Japanese, a little bit of Spanish, and a bit of French.
Amazing.
English, sort of Croatian, Italian, and French in the process of learning, but very good.
Listen,
Yeah.
I would say say hello, say thank you.
It's a must for Ottawa Club. It's very bilingual city, so that's
Which languages do you speak?
English and French. I lived in Sweden for 3 years, so I have basic Swedish, and I studied German at university, so a little bit of German back many years ago.
Perfect.
English, French, Italian, and a bit of Spanish.
Amazing. Lots of love languages in here.
Yeah.
English, Portuguese, Spanish, and I live in Korea for 5 years, so I can survive in Korea.
I lived in Hong Kong for 6 months, and all I knew was my address. So
Oh, that was awesome.
So what's really important here is, one more? Oh, perfect, yes. Absolutely. Which languages?
Spanish, French, Italian, and Portuguese.
Oh, that's 5 languages. Okay, so what's really important here is we all have at least one language that we can sit and talk to each other. But there's a lot of different languages out here, and we live in Canada, it's a very diverse place. And I'm not sitting here lecturing you about you need to learn 16 different languages to operate your club. What I think is really important is we can put people who sit in a room and speak 5 different languages with no one same language, and it'd be a little bit of an issue. But we all speak at least one language together, and there's tons of communication issues. So part of that is we want to come together and speak a shared language. And I'm not saying just English. What I'm saying is you go into the club and everyone is speaking consistently. We are talking about what is the purpose of our club and why do we do what we do. I want every single coach to be coming out of, if you ask them and poll, there's 30 coaches, and you ask them why the club does what they club, you should have 30 of the exact same answers. And that's what's really important is we often forget that we're not communicating to each other. We have so much going on in our day-to-day that we're not actually taking a step back and saying, are we giving the right people the right information and being transparent and building that trust? We have done strategic planning with, I don't even know how many clubs. Waters United is one of them. We've worked with a lot of clubs out west. And communication always comes up as an issue across every single stakeholder. And part of that is people just don't know what's the process, what's the system. They come to us and say, well, we need to be on social media and we need to be on TikTok. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Matt's actually going to start a TikTok account and he's going to start dancing. That is not the answer. The answer is not you need to be on 16 channels and you need to be putting videos out there. It really starts with internal communication. how are you actually speaking to your people and helping them understand the value that they are to your organization? And how are you bringing into the conversation and not worrying about all that extra at the beginning and really building that up? So we're actually working, and this is what I will eventually call it our team. Why I actually want to bring our team up is Saskatchewan Soccer Association has brought us in to work with clubs to help them level up their marketing. And not just marketing, but communication, and saying, or we're coming in and saying, this is how you actually build a marketing plan. This is how you actually communicate back to your members. This is how you really think about who are you speaking to, who are your different stakeholders. And making sure that from pre-season, 8 weeks before, what you're saying to them, getting them excited, getting them ready, to 8 weeks after and keeping them in the loop. So it is really important. We're going to dive further into it. And the reason communication is so important is when your communication is working well, you are a well-oiled machine. And it takes time to set up the emails, and it takes time to set up your Slack channels or your social media. And it's really uncomfortable if you don't come from a marketing communication background. You all of a sudden have to write tweets or write emails and be very consistent with it. Once you actually set it up for one season, rinse, repeat, copy, paste, rinse, repeat, copy, paste, and you just keep redoing it and improving it. So we want to take a lot of that stress out of it, you don't need to be amazing and perfect, you don't need to have the best infographics and visuals, but you just need to be consistent. And we're going to dive into some examples on this. So we really want to help you get to part of that operational plan is communicating what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that constant repetition. So I'm going to give 3 quick examples. 1 soccer, 2 not. We love hockey, don't we? What it does is meant to be. But why I want to bring up these 3 examples is there are 3 very different clubs. So you've got FC Barcelona. I don't know if many of you have seen this video that they have on their website. Their whole ethos is we're more than. We're more than winning, we're more than just the points, we're more than just the players on the field. And they really talk about and build this phenomenal marketing campaign with this video that you get goosebumps and you're excited to be part of it. So aside from talking about the fact that they're how many billion in debt, they have done a great job of saying to their members and saying, you're part of this, you're part of the history, you're part of the growth and development. They highlight diversity, they highlight the development on the women's side. They really talk about it and always say it's more than just winning. It really is about the fans, it's about the players, about the officials, the coaches, the administrators, every single person. And they're so consistent with it. Another example, and I'm not sure how many of you know who the Trashers are, but there's a really good Netflix Untold docu-series on it. They're a hockey team that a mobster bought for his 17-year-old son. And I mean, watch the documentary from a culture perspective, just brutal. Like, they were all about fighting, and they were all about just being like the bad boys in the block. But they had built a phenomenal culture with fans who showed up at every single game and bought season tickets. And 15 years later, they're still getting together and talking about it. And they were only around for 1 year or 2 years. But they built this phenomenal culture, and they communicated, and they said over and over, this is who we are. And they showed up every single time and were consistent with their messaging. The Winnipeg Jets, that's my hockey team, so I had to put them in because they disappeared. But even when they went away, I was still a Jets fan, and we didn't have a team. So it just goes to show, and then they came back, and they came back stronger than ever. But they have this phenomenal atmosphere and culture, and they go in, and the communication they do with their members is incredible. So these are just 3 examples, and I know they're organizations with big money behind them, but you don't have to go that big. It really is about how are you celebrating the wins, the day-to-day wins. And I'm not talking about the score or the standings or the schedule. What are the wins in your club? If your values are all around building better leaders and building community, well, how are you talking about the players on your team who go in and do community service or welcoming new immigrants into the team? If anyone has an example of the way that you celebrate something in your club, we'd love to hear it because there's probably a lot of them. Oh, seriously, coming up with some answers. But yeah, this is just something to think about, and I'm going to speak through a little bit more here. marketing and communication really is about building a funnel. So you're really starting with how are we building awareness of who we are as a club? How are we making sure people consider us and they understand our unique values? And then really, once you get them into your club, how are you making them loyal and your advocates? Because the biggest, we know we're all in sales, the biggest driver in sales is going to be word of mouth. A kid has a phenomenal experience, a parent understands your development theory, a coach loves what they do, they will be your sales team. So it really is about internal communication, aligning on what that strat plan is and your purpose, your vision, your values. We're going to hold questions just because I know I'm really kind of time now. There's tons of social media platforms. Do not do all of them. Pick one or two, do them really well that you know your target audience will be on. We can dive more into this. You can find me this weekend. And build a communication plan and be very consistent. So really think about, if we don't have a ton of resources, and I'm just going to use an example of a club that has, 1.5 staff people. Okay, so just put out something on social media once a week that says, this is what we're doing. This is what's happened this week, the wins and the losses, the celebration that we're having. And just be consistent. There's a lot of tools out there, and I know from a marketing side, I know I'm kind of flying through this. If you as a club want to go deeper into marketing, we can help you. There's also a lot of grants. We've worked with a lot of clubs out in Saskatchewan and BC that they apply for a grant to get money to fund their marketing. But this slide, these are just examples of tools. A lot of them are free that you can use to help make your marketing easier. If you have questions again, happy to help. So what I'm going to leave you here is think about what is the current state of your communication? Where do you want to be? And that really should be everyone understanding what you stand for and being able to repeat it in the moment. And how are you going to get there? What are those gaps? We're not going to give you time right now to think about this. We'll give it to you at the end. And I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth to talk about project management.
Okay, so when we look at project management, or for our purposes, I want you to think of project management as program management. The term program talks a little bit more towards what we do day to day. And I'm going to go through it pretty quickly because this is kind of another one of those 2.0s. You've got your operational plan, it's churning. Now you're going to want your programming to start being seamless. And an informal way to look at project management is how we move information from one person to another. So what's on the screen as you read, you may have said to yourself at your club at some point, oh my gosh, if this person leaves, how will we turn that information over to the next person? They've been running the house league for 20 years and it's all in their head. How can we move that information from one person to another without playing a wonderful game of broken telephone? So that 20-year personnel moves from the role, and they do it like that. Maybe it's a car accident and they have to take 2 months off. Maybe it's that, oh my gosh, so-and-so resigned, and they're not giving us any notice. Culture may have something to play in that, and they walk. If you don't retain a good program management system, you're constantly going to be in training and transition. And when we talk about we don't have time, sometimes it's because where we're spending our time is on the wrong things. If we spend our time as an executive director counting uniforms on a field and trying to connect with the supplier because we don't know the contact because the person left, that is a problem top down in how we are planning. So to go quickly through this, so I'm going to keep this as a screenshot. The biggest components of this plan, and you can look up PMI, the Project Management Institute. If you're like me, you can strive to become designated, which is where I'm on my way. Plan and monitor are the two most important pieces to this puzzle. You can get a ton of information, and I'm going to show you some examples. We initiate with what is the program and what's its goal. That's all we need. The plan is the most important part. How do we get from the start of the program to the end of the program in a systematic, aligned way? Execute, by theory, is we're getting it done. We're in season, it's doing what it needs to do. Monitor is, are we actually reflecting against the plan? My suggestion, every program in your club, NSO, PSO, should have a project manager. And that project manager can be different. It's a lot of load on a project manager to have your high performance and your recreation and your competitive coordinator. Break it up so that one individual is in charge of one and the other, and then you can hold each other accountable. You want to close off. Closing off a program to restart the next one is where all the learning happens. Have a close-off meeting at the end of a recreational season. A roundtable to say what worked, what didn't, what needs to change, and against the plan. Not a high level, we're going to talk about it, we're going to walk away and we're going to forget. How did the plan work, and where do we go? Again, you're in my brain, which not a lot of people like to be, is something simple. Competitive tryouts. Okay, you've got your open sessions and your tryouts, and they start in September. That can be all you do in year one. Write that down. What's the task? How I learned bottom up to do project management, I spent a year documenting. You're living it every day. Ask your competitive coordinator on an Excel sheet to track everything they do. You're not micromanaging them, and make them know that from the start. The goal of project management is to not say, Matt, did you do everything you were supposed to do? It's giving them a roadmap, and you, as their operational leader, project manager, to say, did we accomplish the things we needed to do in the right order, at the right time, for the right reasons, for success? So where we go from here is, when does a program exist? Who's responsible for it? What greater program is it part of? A description, because, wait, they may leave. And when your next coordinator comes in, how much more prepared would they be if they could go to this roadmap and say, oh, I may not have come from the world of soccer, and I don't even know what open sessions or tryouts mean. I have a descriptor so that at least I'm putting them steps forward in that learning, and you remove yourself from some of that learning because they can do it themselves as they transition. Where you want to go is subtasks. To run open sessions, and for all of those in the room who have, it's not as simple as showing up September 15th and running tryouts. Operationally, there's a whole bunch of steps that have to happen in order to make that tryout a success. I can promise you that if it's listed in a clear and concise way, with a systematic timeline in how to do it, you're going to be more successful. The players are going to feel it on the field. The coaches are going to see their equipment. They're going to have had a meeting. You're going to know what that shared schedule is with your competitive coaches for conflicts. You have time because you've laid it out in a more formal, systematic way. We go back to who has time for this? Who doesn't have time for this? If we don't do this, we are creating the need for no time. We're actually answering our own question. Think of year two. Now the individual who did it, or the new person who comes in, has the ability to start. What if they come in August 23rd? Wait, we need a staff and volunteer schedule. Boom. And the rest of it should already be done in a folder somewhere. So they can come in, jump in where they need, and just continue on in the process.
Liz?
Yeah.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah.
I love that slide just from like an executive director standpoint, because I think about my coaches and my team managers, and if they have a document like that, they know what deadline they need. Nick was calling us the night before, I need this. And so they get a better understanding of operationally what goes on and the timelines that we're dealing with. So from a project management standpoint, I'm like, wow, that's...
And what you're going to see, and we can talk at lunch too, I know that there's people who want to bring this into their organizations. When we look at software, so again, we're in a technology world. Project management doesn't have to be an Excel sheet that you have to manually update. Lots of them have integration with your Office 365 or your iOS systems, where it's automatically dumping into your Outlook calendar for your entire staff. This is actually my family's calendar, which is in a sauna, which just shows how crazy I am when it comes to all things operations. What this will look like for you as an ED, as a board member, because everyone should have access. You can see in every color code, maybe yellow is your competitive program. Maybe pink is your communications calendar that Taryn just talked about. You look at it with a broader idea of what's going on in your club, boom, you have time. Beautiful thing about software, it's drop and drag. You need some, wow, September 20th is going to be insane, and trying to get to begin. Who's got tasking, and where can we move it, because we need that staff. So you're going to open up that dialogue. Volunteers, board members in specific roles. If you have a competitive director, add them to the yellow box. They can then go in and see that calendar. We often get asked, why do we have to get paid for what we do? Why can't a volunteer do it? And what work actually happens? We know at the club level how much is going on day to day. This also shows that visual in a really constructive way. And we're going to motor through this, but I encourage you all to do a gap analysis for this section as well. We're going to end off with review and evaluation. So we want to ensure that strategy has evaluation so that we can measure its success. You'll hear Matt talk about KPIs and ROIs. What is that evaluation for us to agree that we've succeeded in something? And to not do that is just defining something that doesn't exist. We need to review it and make sure that our members are satisfied, that the programs are satisfied, that personnel, board, strategy is all working together. So we're going to motor through this. Was there Peter Duffner yesterday? So on review, I'm really going to motor through. When we look at surveys, so we may have to do surveys to tick a box. Well, what if we looked at things a little bit different? Surveys shouldn't just be a one-way version at the end of the season to move your programming along. When you look at surveys, have a multitude of different ways in which that survey is being collected. Are you polling, open-ended questions? What are different uses of technology to find a rating system? Some are just using like rating yourself on Google. Is it just a star? Find creative ways to get information without just that typical survey monkey, because times are changing. People want to consume information in a really, really fast and effective way. Focus groups, all of those naysayers, all of those with opinions, pull them in and make them part of a focus group. You give them a voice, you give them a table, you don't even have to be there. You can put one of them in charge. Their goal is to gather information and give it back to you. That sounds terrifying, but you're giving them a platform. You may get some exceptional feedback because they might be a hot and heavy person, but their ideas might be fantastic. Give them a platform. Players, show up at your field. Have your staff, your volunteers show up and ask 3 questions. Are you having fun? How's the experience? Would you come back? All of those things on a live environment, you may get far more consistent data than sending out that survey, and more people may want to talk to you. Retention, growth, data. We talked about what data are we asking for and pulling from the information we have. We all use online membership platforms, but do we add any custom fields? So when we look at custom fields, do you ask demographics? Do you ask how they found us? Do you ask, is this your second year? Are you returning? Is this your first time playing soccer? All of these pieces that are just part of a parent's registration can then be pulled at the end of the year and used to implement and grow your programming. And what I will end with is, we don't survey just at the end of the year. We don't survey just at the beginning of the year and end of the year. I would encourage you to do a mid-season survey. What we found at our club, a quick, simple, mid-season house league survey, changed dynamic at the field. A mid-season coach-to-coach parent survey found the toxicity in some of our teams, and we we changed it so that when the team was going to go toxic and walk out of the room at the end of the year, we caught it. We could do that evaluation midstream and fix the problem. Sometimes we're so busy that we forget to ask. So I will leave you with that. Do you have any final thoughts? Thank you, Matt and Taryn, for giving me the space to do this today. And we will move on to, do you want to do this slide?
Oh, go ahead.
So, when we talk about culture, what we want to leave you with today. At the beginning, we talked about misalignment. What happens if we're not aligned? And the actual answer at the end of the day is there is no soccer. The sport doesn't exist. If you dive deep enough into that question, you cannot satisfy a program, a set of members, if you aren't aligned from top to bottom. Obviously, with some alignment, you sit in that uncomfortable middle of some misalignment, some alignment. What if we were 100% aligned? So we just want to leave you with the words on the board. At the end of the day, the system works together. And that's what we want to have left you with today. Wrapping right around to the business of sport is a lot more complex than people take it, and culture. And Matt Young's work, Taryn's work, I'm super excited to be involved, is where we want to take the system moving forward, and culture wins 100% of the time.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
I think
Let's give Elizabeth a hand. Thank you for your patience and staying late. We know we've gone over. See, we want to get listen, we built a lot and shared a lot today. We're not expecting that everyone goes home and implements this. That's why we just wanted to show you everything that you should, may, want to consider in terms of operating a club. If you have any questions or issues, that's why we're here. And as Taryn said, we work with organizations that have just asked us to come in contract. We're that disciplined project management that will help that go along. If you don't know how to do it, if you want to know, it doesn't matter what size your club is. And we've gone and got government grants to work with organizations and new people in organizations, like she said, in Saskatchewan. So there's lots of different ways to tackle this. So find our information. Our contact information is right there on the screen. Take a shot. If you need any help, that's why we're here. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. And we'll turn it over to Pat.